So to continue the conversation, our next speaker is my esteemed colleague from CREST, Joan Herman, who is co-director emeritus at the center now. She has a wealth of experience in researching all things assessment, particularly formative assessment as it pertains to schools and best practices. So, Joan?
Thanks, Alan. I'm so pleased to be here this morning. I feel, as Tom mentioned, like a fish out of water, but I will try and handle the task I was handed. To answer the question, is there a role for evidence in the future of K-16 technology? So wait for it. Wait for it, it's coming. My answer is yes, there is a role for evidence in the future of K-16 technology. And my future, in contrast to some of my colleagues here, is going to be talk about a more immediate future. Of the endless possibilities for the use of evidence in the development and use of technology in K-16, I'm going to talk about three. One, the use of technology in database decision-making, including the use of formative assessment, something I've been very interested in. Secondly, and Sarah has already done a really good job of covering this, so I might just skip it, the use of evidence in systematic development of technology tools. And then thirdly, to consider the evidence base for the effectiveness of games. And just to give you a little preview, we're in really rarefied space with this group in terms of the quality of the work they're doing, the kinds of outcomes that are being addressed, and the thoughtfulness and educational and learning basis, which is the foundation for the work. And so I guess some of what I'm going to say is going to, in some ways, harken back to Gino's question, is sort of back to the real world. How do we get more of an emphasis on the good stuff, and how do we learn what we need to learn? So Alan told you a little bit about my background. I think probably my colleagues would not exactly call me a technophobe or a Luddite. However, I'm pretty brick and mortar, and my interest in my entire career has been in the design and use of assessment to improve programs, schools, and student learning. And most recently, I've been interested in the role of assessment in the implementation of new college and career-ready standards in ELA, math, and science. In all of these standards, the emphasis is on students' ability to use and transfer their knowledge to solve important, authentic problems in life. And I've also been very involved in some of the conversations that have already come up in almost every presentation. I feel like I can't see, but around deeper learning and the role of so-called non-cognitive skills, 21st century skills in students' learning and future success. So, one of my interests has been in bringing to reality an idea that I think Eva and I have gone back, 40 years on, which is the design of coherent assessment systems and moving from an over-reliance on accountability testing to think about how assessment at all levels of the system need to provide coordinated views and stepping stones to helping kids achieve important goals for life. and end-of-year standards. So you see here a picture of how I think the ideal system ought to work, where we start from the student and where the student is. We use in-process assessment during the course of instruction, so-called formative assessment, to understand where kids are, where we want them to go, and to fill in gaps during the process of instruction so that we can get students there. Ongoing formative assessment builds to more formal, say, weekly, monthly unit assessments that give more formal checkpoints about how kids are doing. Those can move into and build towards quarterly goals, benchmark testing, were they a little different, and finally to the end of the year, where because we've been carefully monitoring and responding to where kids are at every grain size, we actually have kids achieving the end of the year standards we've set out to achieve. And this is a system that fuels decision-making not only for classroom teachers, but at appropriate grain size provides data for principals, districts, states, and the like, so that they can do their job in analyzing how things are going, filling in gaps, providing supports for those who need them. So technology's role in bringing this vision to reality can be amazing and quite delectable. It's enabling rich, personalized possibilities for the ways in which students can demonstrate, document, and build their capacity, including those involving technology and media use and collaboration. Think richly layered portfolios revealing the details of kids' skills and how they can marshal those skills together to accomplish major performances, major meaningful performances. Data that can be used to understand and respond to the whole child, where children are, where they need to be, and how to get there. New technology capabilities in assessment development, administration, scoring, analysis, and decision-making support programs are emerging nearly daily. And these enable teachers and students to access, organize, and make sense of data that simply have not been possible in the past. We're in a position to really bring individualized learning and personalized learning to a reality. So it's an exciting time for multimedia design and wow, whiz-bang technology. These advances bring to teachers' fingertips and to leaders' fingertips the data they need to make good decisions. We know that data-based decision-making works. We might argue about whether Black and Williams effect sizes were inflated or not, but we can argue about whether it's the very best intervention ever known to mankind, or it's just something that makes an important difference in student learning, but indeed we know that it makes a difference in student learning. Similarly, with teachers, schools, and districts' use of data, technology is today putting a wealth of data at educators' fingertips in ways that are digestible and useful and used. But at the same time, data-based decision-making is only as good as the data it reflects. Garbage in, garbage out, as the saying goes. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't raise the question, are we measuring and is our evidence about the right stuff? Are the links we're making between students' performance on assessments and what to do about it next, are those valuable links? Are they valid links? You see here education for lives and work, conceptions of the competencies that students will need for success in life and work. And we've already heard from a number of our earlier speakers about them. So these include 3 broad buckets: cognitive skills such as problem solving, creativity, critical thinking; interpersonal skills such as collaboration, communication, and cultural sensitivity; and intrapersonal skills such as grit, achievement, motivation, and efficacy. Historically, we focused on a narrow band of low-level cognitive measures in the design of our systems. For example, at Crest, we recently did a study of middle and elementary school teachers across the state of California, and looked at the quality of interim assessments and formative assessments and formative practices that they were involved in. What we found, and this is important given that interim testing is such a major part in most schools' life these days, is virtually no attention to higher level skills, to mathematical thinking. Almost exclusive attention to the lowest levels of procedural knowledge in mathematics and lower level application. And on the formative assessment front, in case studies, what we found is that although teachers appreciate and know that the Common Core state standards, which is what California is committed to, while they know that the standards require new levels of mathematical thinking and reasoning and the integration of content and practice, teachers are struggling with how to do that. They know they can talk the talk, they know that formative assessment is important. They claim to be engaged in formative assessment and they're doing the best they can, but when push comes to shove, they don't know how to probe for mathematical thinking and reasoning and use of evidence, nor do they know how to develop the kinds of problems that would push kids in that direction. Certainly technology can help in getting us to better measures, and we at Crest, and I know some of my colleagues here are already working on this. For example, Smarter Balance and Park are pushing us to many steps ahead. There's interesting work at ETS, WestEd, Jobs for the Future, and SRI. But how will we assure that such efforts getting at deep cognitive skills as well as at intra and interpersonal competencies such as grit, persistence, mindfulness actually become the norm rather than the exception? We in this room, I hate to tell you, are the exception, not the rule. Although I'm sure we're all very proud that we're the exception and not the rule. So, that's issue one. Technology has a role in making assessment use more efficient and feasible and bringing new possibilities for formative assessment and evidence-based decision-making to reality in schools and classroom. And similarly, sound evidence surely has a role in the systematic development of new technology-based learning programs and projects, whether they be games, simulations, or any other technology-based option. Well, I guess that figure didn't transfer very well, and I'm going to skip through this because I'm almost out of time, and I'm going to claim, and indeed Sarah covered it in the way that we need to start development with a clear idea of where kids are starting and where they need to be, and then fill out this simple design problem, which is how to weave the multiple goals we might have for student accomplishment into a trajectory of learning that takes kids from where they start to where they need to be. How do we marshal the best of what we know in research on learning, on game mechanics, on social context and the like, to build activities that will be motivating for kids and get them to the goal. So we're going to skip through that. And again, the issue is, in this rarefied space, we're dealing with important outcomes. But if you look at the world of education games, the focus, as with historically and standardized tests, is pretty low level. So let me move to finally, third point is, what do we know about the effectiveness of games? And some of these figures have come up, but it's a stark contrast, I think. Earlier figures is a little different, but data. What we know is domestic sales of computer and video games is growing astronomically from 11.7 billion in 2008 to 15.4 billion in 2013. The Pew Research Center's studies indicated that 72% of US teens play video games. So contrast that big investment with SRI's meta-analysis of K-16 digital games, studies of games effectiveness for the 12-year period between 2000 and 2012. They found 69 published studies across, from kindergarten to teacher education, across every subject, and not only in education, but in clinical settings as well. If that weren't depressing enough, we only have 68 studies. What makes it more depressing, at least for me, is the uneven quality of the studies. In order to have something to look at, I would guess the SRI researchers had pretty minimum requirements for what was inside the box. So the study had to use an experimental or a quasi-experimental design without any regard to sample size or representativeness of sample. The studies had to include pre- and post-testing, and the treatment and control conditions had to be described. There were a few other things, but those, I think, are the major ones. I looked at a random sample of their 69 studies. I looked at about 15 of the studies, and just for sort of design issues. And what I found, as I've said before, is depressing. Really small sample sizes, really unrepresentative convenience samples, unit of analysis flaws where in one example I looked at, I think the treatment was in one classroom, maybe it was two classrooms, control was in two classrooms, unit analysis was at the kid level, even though there was a curriculum intervention. Game treatment sometimes confounded with curriculum. Very, very few studies gave any attention to retention, delayed retention, and the common theme of my comments, generally very mundane outcome measures. Some meta-analysis results. The study did game versus non-game comparisons, and then also included studies that compared theory-driven augmented designs versus regular designs, and in both cases they get medium effect sizes, which I guess is pretty positive for the effective games, unless you consider that published studies only include significant results. But anyways, the researchers started with a set of hypotheses about moderating influences on game effectiveness, and you see here what they looked at. you'll find, probably not be surprised, given the mix of studies and the quality of the studies, that their hypotheses in general were not confirmed. As one example, narrative was negatively associated with effectiveness. Since that's come up, I thought I'd mention that. But the bottom line is, it was a mix of studies, too many moderating variables given the sample size, and as the authors noted, the results could not be convincing. But the bottom line is the research base is meager. The influence of learning and game mechanic variables, our knowledge about those relationships is pretty murky, and important variables remain unexamined. We know that there are enormous gender effects and demographic effects or differences in game use, and yet these differences in general have not been examined in the literature. So, getting to greater effectiveness, my recommendations would be, let's be sure we target deeper learning goals, as many of you in this audience are doing. We need more effective measures of deeper learning, the full range of cognitive inter- and intrapersonal skills. Big data and analysis techniques can help us generate hypotheses for how and why things are working, but we really need to concentrate on rigorous design and measurement for hypothesis testing and really solidifying the research base towards better design. And thank you.